Hey guys, welcome to the 2 Million Minutes podcast, how to make the most of your 4 years in college. I'm Rosan, and during finals week, my friend Lucas and I picked the brains of Harvard seniors and asked them to reflect on their college experiences, break down how they approach different aspects of college life, and share lessons they learned with future students. In this episode, we are talking with Gussie Roc, one of this year's undergraduate speakers. She concentrated in American history and literature and wrote her senior thesis on Beyonce. We asked her about her thesis, but also her other involvements at Harvard. Gussie was a co-director for the Harvard College Film Festival and shares her experience organizing such a big event as a college student. We also discussed the Harvard experience as an artist and the art scene at Harvard in general. Gussie interned at the Stephen Colbert Show and tells us how that was like, and then leaves us with some advice for younger students as well as her favorite spots on campus. We hope you enjoy the conversation, and without any further ado, here is Gussie Roc.
We are here with Gussie Roc.
Yes.
Who is a graduating senior.
Yes.
First of all, how does it feel to be graduating?
It feels scary. Don't do it. I wouldn't recommend it. On the one hand, it's really exciting. And after 4 years, you're kind of, you have your habits down, you have your friends, and Harvard kind of feels old hat in a lot of ways. But I think there's something really special about being around people that are amazing all the time and being around so many of them and always having these great opportunities in your face all the time to the point where you couldn't possibly do everything. And then really abruptly the core just gets cut and you have to fend for yourself. You've had advisors all the whole time through, and there's no one to tell you what to do next. And so that's both a really exciting point and also a really scary point because it's completely up to you what you make of the next step.
Let's try to get to that point of what to do next. But first, let's talk about some of the things that you have done and been involved with during your time here.
Yeah.
You're very involved in performing arts on campus. Can you talk a little bit about your experiences with that?
Sure. So I went to a high school with no grades. We did a lot of art stuff and kind of focused on learning for the sake of learning. I was in Brooklyn Heights. And so I was really arts-oriented, and Harvard was a huge, different way of learning and stuff like that. So it was really a learning curve, and I remember getting my first grade back and going to my TF and saying, I just don't understand what this means, like, please explain. And he was really like, I can't change it, I'm sorry, like, we'll talk, like, and I was like, no, like, I really just don't, like, I don't know, because also for Harvard, getting something like an A- or a B+ is considered bad. But like, I was like, oh, I thought that was good. I don't know. Like, I don't even need you to change it. Like, what's going on? What's happening? So, I remember that. And it just, like, was so funny to me coming from that environment. And, but I really wanted to get involved in theater stuff. So I started, I did a pre-orientation program, the freshman, or now it's called the first year arts program. And that's where I kind of met a lot of my close friends. And then I ended up being a proctor for that, which kind of defined a lot of what I did during the 4 years. But yeah, I got involved in a lot of theater stuff, and I produced shows, which was a different experience for me because I had done a lot of playwriting. And yeah, it's really cool to make other people's stories come alive and be involved in that kind of spot on campus. And just, I feel like it's funny, freshman year, I've just, being involved over the course of 4 years, watched the art scene at Harvard change a lot. And so that's been really interesting.
In what way has the art scene changed?
Yeah, I think that For example, when I started, it was really dominated by this group called the Harvard Radcliffe Dramatic Club, and they kind of controlled all of the spaces and made all of the performances happen. And by the time I got to the end of my sophomore year, there was a lot of shifting of what people thought of as the kinds of theater. I mean, we were operating with the backdrop of the Black Lives Matter movement and a bunch of different cultural shifts, and people were really sort of urgently trying to change how they looked at art. And I think that came from both people who felt marginalized and wanted to share their art and kind of just escape the traditional means of showcasing what they wanted, and also people who wanted to be allies and support that kind of art. And so what ended up happening was a lot of the best theater on campus ended up being from smaller groups, what were smaller groups like Harvard's Black Cast, and there was a resurgence in Teatro, which was the Latinx theater group, and they did a great show called In the Heights, and it just became this really cool scene with a lot of different voices, and people started kind of pushing the boundaries of what theater had been, and it was just really interesting to watch that cultural shift through the lens of art at Harvard.
So there's a renewed interest that led to more groups being formed?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what do you think that which groups did you end up being a part of?
I ended up not doing theater as much and doing more film and doing more writing stuff. I think a lot of that had to do with me I kind of got tired of helping other people tell stories, and I wanted to write my own stuff and make my own stuff happen, and like the film festival kind of became my thing, and then I got involved into more creative writing classes. But I think just watching that was something that was really cool after having started. I mean, like the plays that I did like an ancient Greek play, like a play about these, like, it was called Bachelorette, and it was about these, it was kind of a Mean Girls-esque, like, you know, fast forward into the future type deal with these like crazy girls, and I did a comedy farce, and those things were all fun and great, but it was cool to see that people were really breaking out of the mold of the traditional modes of theater, like Greek tragedy and like comedy, and by the time I was a senior, the scene had just exploded into this awesome thing.
For those who don't know, could you maybe talk a little bit about the film festival and your involvement in it?
Sure. So as I said before, I was a proctor all for my sophomore through senior year for the freshman or the first year arts program. So basically, you just welcomed new students to Harvard and, you know, do a bonanza of art, different kinds of art, and make everyone try different things, and it's great. And people kind of teach workshops, and it's fun. But so I noticed through my own interest trying to pursue film extracurricularly, and also through younger students coming to me and kind of also being interested in pursuing film, that there was really a void for what people could do extracurricularly. For example, like a lot of BES classes were closed off to non-concentrators, especially as you got older, the options became less and less. Or it would be really hard to get equipment unless you were in the concentration, things like that. And just film equipment is expensive in general, and whatever. So, and you know, there would be a lot of screenings from different groups on campus and stuff like that, but there wasn't really a central gathering point or a central place where people who were interested in film extracurricularly could kind of get together and find their group and make cool things happen. So my freshman year, I heard about this festival that these two women had done who were seniors at the time, and they started off in Seaver 113 and had this 2-day event where they invited a couple speakers, and it was really cool. I went to one of the events and I was like, oh, this could be a really cool thing for me to participate in. I liked that it was offbeat and kind of not a part of Harvard's traditions. After freshman year, you kind of get tired of comping things and trying to fit in to, what people are telling you to do. And so that was really refreshing that it was possible to start something new and be a part of something new, as well as my interest in film. So I got involved in that. I started working on events, and during my involvement my sophomore year, it was really struggling to find its identity as a festival. And so it was cool to take that over as co-director with Isaac my junior year, and just make the identity for the festival, basically. There's a really big film festival, student film festival at Brown called the Ivy Film Festival, and we were inspired a lot by that, but we also wanted to examine, okay, so what makes Harvard's festival unique? There are other film festivals, a bunch of other film festivals out there. There's a huge other student film festival. We don't want to kind of just be copying what they're doing. So what we did was we focused a lot on the kinds of things that are uniquely Harvard. So talking more about social justice issues and humanitarian issues, and looking at the intersection of that between film and entertainment and media. So, for example, we brought in, our big speaker was David Simon, who executive produced and wrote The Wire and Show Me a Hero, and Treme and other stuff like that. And we put him, instead of putting him with a professor of film, we had a professor of history and African American studies interview him and do a dialogue. So you kind of got this different perspective. And he's obviously really interesting, and it was really cool to just hear him kind of talk a little bit more about politics through the lens of his work that he had done.
How did you reach out to invite him to the event?
He was the parent of a senior, so we kind of got him to to come stop on over. Yeah, exactly.
Nice.
Yeah.
Were there any lessons or that you learned from either being involved with the first year arts program or any previous events that you applied to this new event you're running?
Sure. I think just maybe, I guess, a lesson I took from the first year arts program was not to take yourself too seriously. I think trying and failing is really important at Harvard, and oftentimes it feels like you have to be perfect. But I think working on this event that was only in its third year gave us a lot of freedom to try new things and have things be bad or good and kind of figure out what worked or didn't work. That was kind of a liberating experience. So, just kind of using it as I think embracing the fact that Harvard in a lot of ways is a bubble and there's a lot of room to make mistakes, and using that time here for that specific purpose and not always feeling like everything has to be exactly right.
How did you think about what would have been a successful event, or what criteria did you have for good and bad for that?
We wanted to bring people together to talk about film who were different from each other, who were coming from different perspectives. So a couple of our screenings were from filmmakers around the world, just like our films. So when Isaac and I became directors, we wanted to expand the film festival from being just undergraduates across the country to undergraduates across the world, which was a bit harder to do in terms of logistically what defines people as students, whatever. There's different, criteria, but it was worth it, I think, just to see the kind of vast array of what people were making and make those cross-cultural connections, as well as we did a screening of The Hunting Ground, which was a documentary about sexual assault on campus, and we had students from the Harvard Law School come talk to us who were involved in the aftermath of the documentary and, you know, the lawsuits surrounding that, and talk to us. And there was an interesting connection there with Harvard students talking to grad students and grad students talking to the greater Cambridge community. So also seeing those kind of more local connections happening was really cool. So yeah, it was great to be a platform for that and to use something that we really loved, which was film, as a way to kind of start these conversations.
That's really cool. I thought it was very interesting that you mentioned the Harvard bubble, but it had a positive connotation. Usually it's always seen as something bad.
Yeah.
But yeah, bubble where you can fail. What were some failures that maybe you went through during your time here, or maybe any advice on what people should try out while they're here?
Yeah. I think that it's definitely easy now to look back and be like, I should have done this, I should have done that, I have all of these regrets. And that's definitely really true. But at the same time, when I think about that, I'm also like, oh, if I hadn't have done that, it wouldn't have led to this, and it wouldn't have led to this. So I think it's harder for me to give advice specifically about what people should or shouldn't do. But I think something that I discovered was that I really, when I got here, especially coming from a school that was very different than Harvard, I really tried to make myself to be a Harvard student in a way that where I kind of lost touch with who I was, which sounds kind of cheesy, but it's so true. Like, I stopped doing writing, for example, because I did more creative writing, and there weren't any groups really on campus that did writing specifically. There are groups like The Advocate that read writing, but it just didn't feel like my style. And I was kind of, reluctant to write a play and then put it on because I didn't have that network of people yet. So it was just this weird thing where all the things I had done in high school, it was hard for me to then apply them at Harvard, and I kind of lost touch and tried to, do things that, not that were completely out of step, because I did things like theater, but just instead of writing plays, I started producing plays and things like that. And I wish that I had been more convicted about what my passions were and found ways to do that. And I think I ultimately found my way back to that, which is cool in a sense because it means that it's something that I really want to do and really love. And by losing it, realized how important it was to me. But yeah, just figuring out ways to hold the things that are important to you closely, even if you want to try out new things, I guess, is the biggest thing that I learned.
While directing this festival, how did you balance also pursuing academics, especially coming from the kind of high school background that you did, or maybe it was a little, I don't want to presume anything, but not having grades maybe made you think about it a little less?
Honestly, I think one thing that was really important, and this sounds obvious, but is so true, is actually choosing a concentration that you like.
Guess that would help.
Like I've met, people who are pre-med and, maybe junior year, they decide to do VS after being reluctant to because, there's no set path, and doing art is really, really hard. Especially at a place like Harvard where there's absolutely no guidance. If you want to work at LinkedIn, there's a path for that. If you want to be a consultant, there's a path for that. Or like big companies like that, like Microsoft or Google, there's ways to do that, and that's really clear. And so people who want to do those things are really lucky, and people who want to do things like art, the path is much less clear, and there are things like Harvard would, so it's not like people have completely abandoned artists, but it's also just very confusing, and I've seen a lot of friends who have graduated kind of go through that. But I think that just kind of steering myself back to your original question, I think that because it's so, that in some ways, because the path is so unclear, it's really tempting to do things that everybody else seems to be doing. I remember coming in as a freshman and everyone was taking LS1A, EC10, CS50, and I was like, okay, well, I must be doing something wrong then. And I was able to find my way to history and literature, which ended up being my concentration, and I just loved it. So a lot of times while I was I happy to write a 15-page paper? No. But because I really liked the subject, it felt much less like work, and I was really excited to learn what I was studying about and to talk about those things. So oftentimes when I had to read a book for a class, it was something that I would want to read anyway. And the times when, it's really hard to get through a test, or the times when it was really hard to, study for something, it was because I wasn't super interested in it. And so I think that was the key to how I, managed my academics with my extracurriculars, that I actually was lucky enough to also want to do my academics because I, focused on picking a concentration that actually worked for me.
Combining your work with your interests.
Exactly, yeah.
That's awesome.
Maybe sticking to academics.
Yeah.
Your thesis seems very interesting. Could
Yeah.
you talk a little bit about that and why you chose that topic?
Sure. So I started, I did history and literature, as I said, and they kind of hold your hand through the thesis process. So you start basically sophomore year, and you start with your sophomore paper. So, and then you do a junior paper, and then you do your thesis. So my sophomore paper was about Jay-Z and hip-hop and consumerism and Reagan's neoliberal America. So I geared it back to American studies. But I basically started off with this question, which was I was just listening to Jay-Z's music, and I was like, oh, this is so interesting. He's talking about, Tom Ford and his loft in Tribeca. Is this really what hip-hop is supposed to be about? It's kind of saying no to the man or to the police or whatever, and it's this defiant political thing, and he's not doing that anymore. How did he get from being 99 Problems Jay-Z to now? And so that was the question that I was just thinking about, walking around, listening to music. And so when my tutors asked, okay, so what are you guys thinking about as your topic, I kind of just said that. And they were I was like, well, this is a question I'm thinking about. I don't really know if that's what you're looking for. But then they surprised me by being really excited about it, and started sending me sources and things like that. I was like, oh, cool, this actually has roots in, Reaganomics and the 1980s and the crack epidemic and all of this stuff that was, American history, and it was actually something that was academic. And so I was studying music, which was really cool, and studying pop culture, which I was really interested in, and how it related to American history and, the longer arc of American history. So then from there, I did a junior paper on nostalgia and neo-soul music, and then I ended up I started off thinking that I was going to explore more things with hip-hop, but then Lemonade came out, and I jokingly remember texting my friend saying, okay, I wonder how long I can derail my junior tutorial by talking about Lemonade, and I bet that it would be for 20 minutes, and it ended up being, we talked about it for the whole 2 hours, and got into this. It was just the three, our tutor and like 2 students, and we got into this huge fight about it. But it was, an academically oriented fight, and it came up in my other classes too, that were also about American history, and so, I started feeling like, okay, this is important to talk about. There's something that's going on here that's going to have a lasting impact on American culture. And so I wanted to explore that because it was something that I kept reading about, and I wanted to figure out what its place was. So then I ended up writing my thesis about that kind of similarly, because I couldn't let it go because it was something that I would have done anyway. So I think, that was an important way that I kind of kept driving my academics here.
Oh, yeah.
Doing something that you would have done anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Sounds like a great setup.
Some people are really excited about statistics. I'm not that person, but that's great for that. Yeah.
I was wondering if we could go back a little bit to, you said that you sensed there was a lack of guidance for the arts majors.
Yeah.
Could you talk a little bit more about how you think people navigate that, and
Sure.
and how you maybe directed your own studies?
Sure. So I definitely think that the arts communities at Harvard are very strong. Theater is very strong on campus, and there's a lot of opportunities for performances, and there are a lot of performance spaces, and I think more and more the administration and faculty are invested in creating those opportunities and seeing them through. For example, the Office of the Arts is very supportive and has these really cool artist development grants where they basically give money to students to do something artistic over the summer. So I have a friend who's going to Australia to learn about a specific kind of dance. I have another friend who did a beatbox animation video and lived with beatboxers, things like that, which are things you would never be able to
where
afford
do the
to do.
beatboxers live?
Yeah, exactly. That's a great question. But so things like that, and then and they also do a learning from performers thing where they basically pay for students pitch an idea. We are doing this play, for example. We're doing this play, and we really want the playwright to come and help us put it on. Can we pay for her to come here? And they do that. So there are definitely support systems for artists while they're at Harvard. Also, in terms of film, Harvardwood is a really cool program where the Office of Career Services runs a program. They kind of take students who are interested in film or working in Hollywood and takes them to all these different Harvard alums and shows them, what Hollywood is like and different TV sets and things that, it's just a really cool opportunity.
It's called Harvardwood.
Yeah,
Okay.
like Hollywood, yeah. But so I definitely think that I've never felt like, while I've been at Harvard, oh, where are the artists? Where's the arts community? It's definitely been very strong and in my face, and it's been great to be a part of that, and I've just met incredible artists doing incredible things, and also balancing academics and being interested in singing, but also astrophysics, and that's what I love about Harvard, that people have these crazy disparate interests, and somehow bridge the two together or combine them and are bringing different things to the table in terms of what they're thinking about in their daily lives.
Yeah.
I think that for me and for other people or for other students, when it comes to then leaving Harvard, that's when it becomes hard. I remember, you have a freshman advisor, you have a sophomore advisor, you have people kind of helping you out the whole time, making sure that you don't miss a deadline or fall through. At least that was my experience with history and literature. But by the time, it would be nice to have a senior advisor to kind of check in with you. Hey, did you get a job yet? Or here are some great opportunities that I think might fit, or just talking to you about, what you might see as the vision for your future. and just having that as a jumping off point. Sometimes advisors aren't helpful, but it would just be nice to have, someone like put a pile of papers in front of you and kind of help you sort through your thoughts, or just talk to you about their experiences. And I think, like I said, there's definitely very clear pathways for people that want to do certain careers in tech or consulting or business, stuff like that. But it's much harder for artists. And I think that's also because there's not really a clear path,
In art,
in art, yeah.
We saw that you interned at the Late Show with Stephen Colbert.
I did.
How was that experience like?
It was really cool. That was a really it was interesting because I was interning over the summer when the show was in its first season, kind of wrapping up its first season, and people were really watching the show to see, what Colbert would do with it. Everyone calls him Stephen in the office, so I was like,
yeah.
But so Stephen, Stephen would do. That sounds so pretentious, but
don't worry about it.
That's what they call him. So they were trying to see like what Stephen would do in terms of making himself different from the other shows. And I mean, it's a whole staff. Like, he gets to be the personality. He is certainly the boss on the set. But yeah, like, working to create this show and make it different from Fallon, who's, crushing the ratings all the time. And, like, Jimmy Fallon has this really, goofy, it's just basically a fun play date that we get to, like, sit in on and watch and participate in with different celebrities that we like. And the Late Show has that element, but is also really politically oriented. That's why people liked Stephen Colbert in the first place, because they wanted to see him make fun of politicians and things like that and kind of bring levity to politics. And but that's kind of hard to translate to, like, mainstream television for a late night audience, because, by 11:30, people are just looking to laugh and, like, looking for, fun at the end of a long day. So it was really cool to watch him do the live shows for the Republican National Convention, the Democratic National Convention. And it became such a cultural thing that people tuned into, that people would actually call into the show, because all the interns would rotate at the front desk, and people would call in and say, so how does Stephen Colbert choose where the convention is going to be held every year?
Wow.
We were like, he has nothing to do with that.
Quite a bit of power.
Exactly. He's just making fun of it. So yeah, that was really awesome, and we would, like, the interns would stay until 1 or 2 a.m. kind of making it happen. But that was the most fun that I had, because it was, like, the most gratifying in terms of people were talking about it on the internet, and it also felt, so it was both becoming popular culturally, but also having an impact, and people who don't watch the convention were watching that, so it was also had a purpose, so that was really, really cool. And I think it was cool to be a part of the show while the show was finding its footing. And now, like, the marketing campaign for the show was kind of like, make the smarter choice or something like that. And, like, that, is kind of, like, proven to be successful. Like, he's kind of found his identity in kind of being, like, the smarter choice to Fallon or something like that. And so they're both great. But now, like, the Late Show has kind of found its identity in that.
So while working there, were you sort of exposed to some of the, like, strategic talks that they had about the direction of the show?
I think it was more like you kind of, like, hear the talk, because we were, like, below the assistants.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, no, you definitely got the sense that of what people were talking about, what people were kind of envisioning. I saw like a political producer being added like as we were kind of coming in, and kind of seeing the direction of the show. So you kind of heard it like through the murmurings in the hallway and stuff like that. And it was very familial, the vibe of the office. So people are definitely very open, and there's monitors all around the studio and the offices where you can watch the show, and people are watching and laughing and like, oh, I just bought the costumes for that sketch, stuff like that. Like, so it was fun. It was a lot of fun. Yeah.
So it was also primarily work in an office setting. Was there a component with the actual performance that you also worked on?
So we kind of rotated. So when I was doing talent, it was a lot of like stocking dressing rooms and stuff like that, which was also fun just because, like Will Smith would then just walk by. Yeah. Or stuff like that, or you would, like the star of Orange is the New Black, Uzo Aduba, was on the show, and I had to take her family to go watch the interview, like stuff like that. Like Bernie Sanders was there, and just having to go through a ton of Secret Service, just like do your job and like take a cart of water to like the backstage, like was fun. Just like crazy stuff like that. But yeah, it was mostly just like making sure that other people could do their jobs by kind of doing like basic tasks. I remember a couple of times we got to be on the show because they needed extras. So one time I was just at the right place at the right time. They asked me to be in a Pokemon Go sketch where just random people were like walking around. Like it was like they have like openers, so like 30-second openers, cold opens, and I was looking at my phone. I'll show you a picture. I was looking at my phone.
Yeah, can we link to that?
Can we find it online?
Awesome.
I was looking at my phone and like wandering around in the background, like behind his desk, and then he like gets really annoyed that like all of these kids are like that his studio is a Pokemon Go stop. Basically, that's a joke. And then he's like, everyone leave, and we run away.
Nice.
But it was literally just interns and like production assistants who were doing it.
Oh, that's so funny.
Yeah.
That's great.
There was another one where we had to pick up. It was for the Democratic National Convention, like a huge opening scene where there was it was like a musical number, and the whole day me and another intern just spent time gathering the costumes for the show, but then we got to wear them and just do this crazy like dance number. Anyways, yeah.
Pokemon Go kind of fell apart, I feel like.
It did, because it took up too much data, so...
Oh, was that? Yeah.
I think so.
I mean, there was no reason to continue after a while.
It was a summer fad.
Also just took up people's time.
Exactly, yeah. Productivity.
Anyway.
Maybe switching gears a little and shifting back to Harvard.
Yeah.
You were an undergraduate speaker.
Yeah.
For this class. How did that come about? Why did you do that? Or how does one become an undergraduate speaker?
And that's for commencement.
Yeah, for commencement. I had done a lot of speech and debate in high school, and I was, I think at the end of your time at Harvard, like I, like a lot of other students, felt like they wanted to share something about, their journey. And I also felt when I was writing the speech and was applying to do it, I thought it was really important that the speech, whoever it was, kind of talked about what was going on in terms of the political climate now. And I was really willing to do that despite maybe being disqualified for being a little too controversial or kind of, and I never talk about it explicitly, but I wanted to address, what was going on and acknowledge that as Harvard students, that was something that we should be thinking about and engaging with to make the world a better place. And that just the stakes were too high to kind of talk about,
General things.
general
for sure.
things
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
everyone else talks about every year. Yeah.
Well, we won't get too much into politics here, but what are a few things that you think about when you're writing that speech, and maybe can you spoil anything for us about what that's going to be like?
So I won't spoil anything just because there's other articles being written, so I won't take anyone else's story.
For sure.
But I will say that, yeah, I definitely thought about what it means to have a Harvard degree and what we're going to do with that afterwards. I think, like, after the election, regardless of what your political views are, Democrat or Republican, Independent, Green Party, that things changed after that day. America changed into a different landscape, and people had visceral reactions, whether or not, like, individuals were upset. Like, there was definitely an air of sadness on this campus, and just an air of uncertainty. And I really wanted to address that and kind of address how we as students could address that when a lot of times it's easy to feel powerless. And, like, also a lot of people I remember were like, okay, so we need to do something about this. We need to go to protest to, protect the dignity of our friends' lives, whether that's through, like, going to an immigration protest because, like, people who you have friends who, like, parents are immigrants or something like that. A lot of times it was very personal. That, like, so, like, people were, like, really interested in doing those things and getting involved and taking action. There was, like, political arts meetings and stuff like that. But then, and people were almost even thinking about changing their careers paths. Like, okay, maybe I should just abandon screenwriting and go to law school and stuff like that. And I remember one professor saying, like, don't do that. Stick with what you're really passionate about, and that will be what you contribute best to the world, which I thought was interesting advice. But basically, after that kind of initial shock, people kind of just went back to what they're doing in the everyday, and I'm definitely guilty of that too. And I think part of the reason why what I wanted my message to say was that we can't forget to engage with those issues in any way that we can.
Well, I think people can look forward to your speech.
Yeah.
Talking a little bit about your experience, especially in freshman year. Over the course of the 4 years, what were some habits that you built? You mentioned, the fact that you're graduating just when you've built all these habits a little bit earlier in the interview. What were some of those things that you thought helped you?
Definitely wake up early. I think freshman year, I was like, oh sweet. I mean, you see, like, college kids like in movies and stuff like that, like waking up and running to class.
Yeah.
And I was like,
not just movies.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, okay, like, that's just, like, what I'll do. Like, my mom's not here to tell me to get up. And I think just waking up early was great for me because those were the most productive hours of my day before other people were up to kind of tell me to send an email or ask me to do this favor for them. And it was just a time for me to get my head together. So I really valued that time when it seemed like nobody else was awake. For other people, that's like 4 a.m. to 8 a.m. when they do their best work. For me, it was like, early in not the early morning, but the morning. So, yeah, I think after I started doing that, or figuring out the best time for me to work, and capitalizing on that, my life kind of organized itself better.
Interesting.
Yeah.
It sounds like you went through a little bit of trial and error in that process. What were some of the things that caused you to realize that was when you did your best work?
Yeah.
And how did you go about making sure that that's when you were working?
Interesting. I'm not sure. I guess, like, just starting, like, when I did wake up, like, right before class, I just felt so disoriented and discombobulated that I realized that, you know, while that works for some people, it was important for me to kind of get my head together before I started the day. So, yeah, I think people definitely have different approaches. Some people pull all-nighters all the time. I'm not one of them. I remember I tried to pull an all-nighter one time, and I called my mom at 3 a.m., and I was like, I can't do this. Like, I'm going to have to take the L on this one. So, yeah, and I was, like, a freshman. It didn't even matter. I don't know. I think I just, like, asked for an extension, but everything feels higher stakes when you're a freshman, I think.
For sure.
But yeah, no. So there was, I guess, so yeah, like, also, like, talking about my mom, like, just finding, like, a support system, people that, you know, are older and wiser than you, whether that's an upperclassman. I mean, it doesn't have to be, like, a traditional, like, advisor, like a peer advising fellow, just somebody that, you know, is willing to invest time in you and understand where you're coming from, somebody who you can text to ask questions, even if it's a lot of questions, and somebody that's going to kind of be in your corner and who you can literally call at 3:30 in the morning being like, help me, or like, talk to me. It's really important, and I hope people can find that on campus or, you know, off campus through a phone call or something like that. Yeah.
What is one thing you learned freshman year that turned out to be false?
I think people, like, a lot of upperclassmen told me that I should try out a lot of things. And that's cool advice because you get to, you know, try a lot of things out and maybe find something that you're not interested in, but also you kind of end up spreading yourself way too thin. And so I think maybe better advice would be to, you know, be really open-minded the first couple weeks of school, you know, go to the activities fair and meet people and find out what's out there, and then pick 2 or 3 things that you're going to do really well during that semester or during that year, and then carry them out through college. And then obviously, like, you might think one thing that you decided to do was a really bad idea, and then you hear about this other thing, you add things and drop things, but to just focus in more instead of trying to do everything.
Sweet.
Interesting.
What's your favorite spot here on campus?
I have a couple. I love the Harvard Art Museums, working there. And that was really exciting when, you know, that was, excuse me. That was really exciting when the Harvard Art Museums got renovated. And it's a great work spot and a great place to bring people that are visiting and to hang out. Also, there's a garden behind Lamont that nobody seems to know about.
Yeah, there is.
Yeah. It's like if you're walking, literally if you're walking to Lamont but you're in the yard, like, then you just keep walking into there's like a gate.
Yeah, you can see it from, like, the main window on the first floor.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Gotta check that out.
That's a cool spot. The Carpenter Center, when there's, like, exhibits, is pretty cool. What else? Sitting, like, when it's nice out, sitting on the ledge of Widener steps is one of my favorite spots. The Signet, too, where, you know, I spent a good amount of my 3 of my years at Harvard. Was a really important space for me. And where else? Gutman Library is very underrated.
Oh, is that the education?
Yes, it's the education library. I highly recommend it.
I think we've had
multiple people.
Yeah,
tell us
because it's like as good of a, like, a quiet study space as Lamont, but just like better than Lamont. And there's food, you can use your Board Plus, and like there's like soup. Like, I mean, I guess like I'm describing Lamont basically, but it's better.
Government Library.
Yeah, the best pizza is at Government Library, like in the square. So.
And they take Board Plus?
And they take Board Plus.
Okay, that's important
and free tea during finals. So.
Damn.
Yeah,
Damn.
and coffee.
What do you do to relax here on campus?
I think hanging out with friends, that seems really like, obvious, but a lot of times like people forget that that's something that they can do. And like getting really caught up. I have one friend who we call her like we gave her the nickname that she's like down to hang. She has really taught me that like there's always room for people that are important to you to like stop and have a meal that's not with your computer and just refocus and reorient and just reconnect. And I think that's definitely something that like I struggled with my freshman year. Just feeling like if I wasn't doing something that was productive, that I was failing in some way, and that the things that you do outside of class and the people that you meet are as important and as valuable as your academics, and that it's really worth giving time to those people as well as giving time to your work.
Definitely. Gotta grab a meal sometime.
Absolutely.
So, as commencement is approaching, what are you looking most forward to in the next few weeks?
In the next few weeks? Definitely just reconnecting with people in my class. I think Annenberg used to be a central place where you could just see a bunch of people and hang out really casually. And we've kind of gone into our separate after freshman year, we've all kind of gone into our separate, extracurriculars. Like, for example, Marielle did the Crimson. I didn't see her for like a year because she was being a boss. But, so we all kind of do our separate extracurriculars. But then, go into our separate houses and things like that. And everything's kind of like split up. But then, like, we get this week where we kind of get to come back together, which I'm looking forward to. Yeah.
All right. Well, can you leave us with one piece of advice that you would give to freshmen or any of the younger students at Harvard?
Yeah, sure. Really cool people come to campus all the time, and just taking advantage of that, whether that's through, going to events, speaker events, or, looking for events within your house where it's kind of, you get to talk to cool people. And by cool people, I mean, like, both celebrities and really accomplished people. Like, in my house, there was an event with Michelle Obama's head speechwriter, and there was only, like, 20 people there, so you could easily ask her a question. I remember seeing Malala Yousafzai my freshman year.
Wow.
And, like, John Lewis, just all of these incredible, like, Steven Spielberg, and just taking advantage of that because, again, like, it always feels like you don't have enough time to do things, and papers always feel more important, but just taking a second and, sometimes time has a way of being elastic and kind of expanding and giving you more room. Because things almost always get done, and just taking the time to actually enjoy the fact that we're at Harvard and we are at an institution that brings so many amazing and accomplished people into one spot, and actually engaging with them and pursuing them. Whether that's through, fellowships at Radcliffe or through, a speaking series at Sanders. Just, finding those opportunities because it's really rare and, really, really special.
All right. Well,
Sweet.
Gussie, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Really appreciate it.
I hope I was interesting.
No.